Hi, I'm Ashley Llorens, VP and Distinguished Scientist at Microsoft Research. Welcome to our inaugural Research Summit. For the first time, we're sharing the latest from research at Microsoft with the global science and technology community. We are so excited to have all of you with us. This open, virtual format reflects the need to come together as a global community, across boundaries, to address society's biggest challenges. Among those attending this event are researchers, developers, business leaders and policymakers, and many more. You're not only here in the audience, a cross-section of you are also part of our agenda, contributing your own unique insights to the forthcoming discussions. As a global research community at Microsoft, we're inspired not only by our individual advancements, a new algorithm, or even a new computing paradigm, but by the sum of those advancements and the impact that they can have. Our agenda and the research that you'll hear about over the next few days reflect this aspiration for impact, advancing human knowledge and foundational technologies, amplifying human creativity and achievement, fostering a resilient and sustainable society, supporting a healthy global society, and ensuring that technology is trustworthy and benefits everyone. Over these next few days, we hope you'll join us in learning about recent cutting-edge advancements in science and technology research, and in envisioning the future we aim to create. I'd now like to welcome Peter Lee, Head of Microsoft Research at Incubations, for our opening plenary session.
Hello. I'm excited to welcome you to our first Global Research Summit. Getting together to share ideas with our colleagues across the research community, of course, is a natural part of our culture, and it has been for 30 years. But this event, it's a little different. For the first time, we've opened up events like this to anyone who's interested. Now, if we were gathered together in person, you'd be sitting next to scientists, as well as developers, business leaders, students, policymakers, and many other people who do scientific research, depend on scientific research, or simply are curious about the process of discovery and innovation in science and technology. The team here at Microsoft Research has been working really hard to prepare for this event. And I must say, it's been a great experience for us. It's given all of us here a chance to reflect on how research has evolved over the years, on why we do research at all, and how research is becoming increasingly central to everything we do together as a society. As I thought about what to say here today, I came back to an essay written by a man named Abraham Flexner that I reread from time to time. The essay has a provocative title, The Usefulness of Useless Knowledge. The opening passage from this essay asks a question that is pretty uncomfortable for anyone involved in scientific research. I'd like to read it to you now. Quote, "Is it not a curious fact that in a world steeped in irrational hatreds, people devote themselves to the cultivation of beauty, to the extension of knowledge, to the cure of disease, to the amelioration of suffering? Intellectual and spiritual life is, on the surface, a useless form of activity in which people indulge because they procure for themselves greater satisfactions than are otherwise obtainable." For me, at least, these words could have been written yesterday, but in fact, they were written 100 years ago, in the year 1921, in a memo that Abraham Flexner wrote to the Rockefeller Foundation. And then years later, he published this essay in Harper's Magazine, in part to explain the reasons for taking the risk to bring people like Albert Einstein and other refugees from war-torn Europe to the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. People like Kurt Gödel, Robert Oppenheimer, Albert Einstein, John von Neumann, and others were given the freedom to follow ideas wherever they led, with no specific application or outcome in mind. In Flexner's essay, he writes, "I shall concern myself with the question of the extent to which the pursuit of these useless satisfactions proves unexpectedly the source from which undreamed of utility is derived." Flexner used the example of James Clerk Maxwell and Heinrich Hertz in their studies of electromagnetism purely because they found it interesting. But of course, their work laid the foundation for others to build what was necessary to make wireless communication possible. And to take another example that's a bit closer to home, Claude Shannon also spent many nights and weekends pursuing another idea that would prove to be vital to society: information theory. Computer science and the other disciplines that you'll hear about at this Research Summit event stand on a foundation of decades or centuries of work, driven by curiosity, pursued before a single computer had ever been built. For me, I reread Flexner's essay every once in a while, and I ask the people I work with most closely to read it too. It's a kind of pilgrimage, a way to reconnect and maintain a connection with enduring values that speak to the questions of what is research and why do we do it. The essay also reminds me that it isn't always easy for people, or for society at large, to understand the value of research, or to even tolerate the costs of doing it. Now, this idea of pursuing knowledge for its own sake was a driving principle when Flexner and his colleagues founded the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. The pursuit of so-called useless knowledge, the search for deeper understanding, enduring truths, and new beauty, both humbles and inspires us as researchers today. The way I look at it, all researchers are obligated to understand and embrace this idea and to work to keep the flame alive in an increasingly complex world. So, with that as context, what I'd like to do now is talk a bit about Microsoft Research and where it fits in to this grand idea that Flexner wrote about. I'd like to situate the kinds of ideas and problems that MSR works on and where it fits in the broader world of research. Now, a little bit of history first. Microsoft Research was founded 30 years ago in 1991. Nathan Myhrvold and Rick Rashid founded the labs. Rick Rashid's leadership, which I must say was truly inspired, MSR sought to gain credibility as a serious research institution, while also focusing on research areas pertinent to the emerging personal computer revolution. In the very first decade of MSR, there were major advances in operating systems, computer graphics, databases, compiler technology, program analysis, and more. Some of the earliest work on operating systems architecture, 3D graphics, touch interfaces, symbolic theorem proving, SQL, database optimizations, and so much more started flowing out of the heads of MSR's researchers within that first 10 years. Most of that research made major contributions to computer science, but they also led to whole new lines of business for Microsoft and guided Microsoft and the broader tech industry through major transformations. It's easy to forget there were major things that happened, such as the shift from 16-bit to 32-bit to 64-bit processors. That first decade, importantly, established a pattern for Microsoft Research. Research was directed in response to changes in the marketplace, in response to fundamental advances in computing that we knew were just around the corner, and potential growth and new business opportunities for Microsoft. MSR, in that first decade, rapidly became an incredibly powerful engine for new technology transfer. Now, in the second decade, MSR Research expanded. It developed a major focus on software development, productivity, quality, and security. They became incredibly important because the world became dependent on Microsoft products like Windows. And in fact, some of you might remember that the company actually suspended work for a week in order to focus on changes to improve software quality. In response, Microsoft Research created the Programmer Productivity Research Center, which internally we just say PPRC, to do research dedicated to drastically increasing the ability of teams of software developers to work collaboratively to make highly reliable software and do so productively. The PPRC put Microsoft on the path to becoming the premier developer platform in the world, and today we take for granted, but with great pride, that things like Visual Studio, the Z Theorem Prover, and GitHub are natural parts of our company. There were, of course, in that second decade also incredible advances in other areas, such as human-computer interaction, leading to new forms of interaction embodied in devices like the Xbox, Kinect, and HoloLens, and major advances in our understanding of distributed systems and in computer security and cryptography, leading to the foundations of what would become the cloud era in computing. Now, in this most recent third decade of MSR, we've seen stunning advances in machine learning, and especially in deep learning. Back in 2009, Jeff Hinton and some of his students and postdocs spent a summer at Microsoft Research. And somehow they convinced our speech recognition research group to try out the use of deep neural networks instead of Gaussian mixture models to do speech recognition. Now, I'll have to admit that I thought it was a crazy idea. And I wasn't alone. Many considered this a crazy idea. But somehow MSR agreed to try and even sponsored a workshop dedicated to the idea at the 2009 NeurIPS conference. The first engineering results that emerged from that effort in mid-2010 were stunning. And then Google's later experiments with computer vision via deep learning showed the world of research that something really special had been discovered. And now, of course, today, it's hard to find a product or service, especially in the cloud, that isn't touched in some fundamental way by machine learning and whose roadmap to the future isn't tied to the advance of AI. Now, throughout these 3 decades, we became very, very good at earning the trust of our engineering and business colleagues across Microsoft and our partner companies. We were able to work with them to bring these advances in computer science research into products that are in every classroom, every laboratory, every medical and healthcare institution, every home and pocket today. 3 decades in, research at Microsoft has developed an incredible span of human accomplishment and aspiration. Some of the work is very much motivated by the desire to help Microsoft become more successful through better products. Some of the work, on the other hand, is in response to urgent needs in society, such as secure voting or faster validation of new clinical therapies. Other work tries to, quote, break out of the box, such as when we put whole data centers at the bottom of the ocean and operate them for years. Other work that we do is directed at, for lack of a better word, solving useful puzzles, such as how to best route thousands of miles of cables in and out of some of the largest data centers on the planet. And near and dear to my heart, some of the work we do is just simply an expression of joy, such as when we create new high-fashion clothing embedded with computing intelligence. But now, stepping back for a moment, I want to return to Flexner's essay on the usefulness of useless knowledge. While we work in the spirit of following our curiosity wherever it leads us and exploring ideas simply for the enjoyment of exploring them, we here at MSR also understand that we have an obligation to situate our work in the real world. In fact, this is essentially what makes life in an industrial research lab a little bit different. It gives it a little bit of a different texture from life in an academic research lab. This applies not just to addressing our near-term challenges for our business or achieving advances that can move the industry forward a step or two, but also to much broader thinking about our field and its place in the world. Now, here's the way I like to think about it. What I do is I ask the question, what will be inevitably true about the world 1 year from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now? Let me give some examples. If it's inevitable that microcontrollers will shift, say, to a 14 nanometer silicon process in the next few years, what does that say about the kinds of physical systems research we should be doing now? Another example. If it's inevitable that our population will be much older in 10 years, and thus suffer much more from age-related neurological disease, what does that say about the kinds of health and life sciences research we should be supporting and pursuing today? If it's inevitable that we will have incredibly capable and effective artificial intelligence 20 years from now, what kinds of social science and trustworthy computing research should we be working on today? If it's inevitable that the climate crisis will become an even more urgent problem towards the middle of the century, how can we use computing to accelerate climate science and help us find ways to mitigate or prevent future harm? What I hope and ask every person in Microsoft Research to do is to never lose sight of the enduring principles underlying scientific research, as Flexner writes in The Usefulness of Useless Knowledge. It's the core that animates all researchers' work. But at the same time, in recognition of our place in the constellation of the world's most important research institutions, we also have an obligation to choose our problems and our research goals in ways that are relevant to the real world. That might be a world many, many years from now, or it could be today. But it's real in the sense of its inevitability. As a member of the community of research institutions, we here at Microsoft Research humbly submit that this is the way we make important contributions. And we are greatly honored to be counted amongst you. Now, to dig into this a little bit more, and also to set up some thought about the coming fourth decade, I'd like to share a chat I had about this with Rick Rashid, the first leader and the first hire, and of course the founder of Microsoft Research. Before joining Microsoft, Rick was a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, and among his many achievements was the development of the Mach microsystems kernel, which is foundational to several operating systems that are widely used today. He led our organization until 2013 and is still with us as an emeritus researcher. In fact, if I could just share a personal story, when I joined the faculty at Carnegie Mellon Computer Science, one of the professors there was Rick Rashid. And I remember the day sitting in my office in Wien Hall when Rick Rashid came to my office to tell me that he was moving to join Microsoft to start a brand new research lab. I wasn't sure if that was a good idea or not, but I have to say Rick made it work. And so I'm very honored to share this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I thought was important for us, for Microsoft Research, was that we would use, academic publication as, one of our key standards for our success. Mm-hmm. And that was really, that was one of my key goals going into creating Microsoft Research was we should be one of the leading research institutions in the world. And one of the ways we would measure ourselves is our impact on the academic community, not necessarily the number of papers we publish, but the intellectual impact of those papers.
Yep. What's going to be kind of the biggest things for the fourth decade, do you think?
There's several things I think are, almost inevitable over the next, I don't know if it'll be 10 years or not, but probably over the next 10 years. I think one is that the combination of machine learning and program analysis and program proof tools. I think we're going to get into a period where software is much more machine generated than human created. Yeah. And that's going to have a really significant impact on how we think about computing and how we think about computers, and also how we think about the products that get created and the way they get used. I mean, we already see a fair amount of this. I mean, it's one of these things that creeps up on you. I mean, the amount of machine generated code in our systems today is actually pretty high.
Yeah.
Mostly it's pretty simple machine generated code. I mean, it's not that complex, but it keeps getting more complex. And it's a little bit like going back to the analogy with machine learning. If you go back to the sort of period from 2000, 2010, then because of the deep learning technology, suddenly we were able to dramatically expand on the capabilities of those systems. And so really that period from 2010 to 2020 or even now, we're seeing this explosion of technologies for sensing, right? Whether it's natural language, computer vision, self-driving cars, you name it, whatever. There's been this tremendous change, during that decade. I think, again, we're seeing the early days of machine-generated code really having an impact. But I think there's a huge opportunity when we start to be able to apply, machine learning technologies and proof technologies and our better understanding of software and programming and what it means to do specification and what it means to develop code. I think that's going to have a big impact.
What the research challenges we pursued in our first 30 years have in common is that they were generally focused on doing things with computing itself. Making computers more capable, more reliable, more secure, easier to program, more accessible, and sometimes just plain old more fun to use. But computing technology is now woven into the fabric of our society, so much so that we can no longer separate the research challenges we face in computing from the broader challenges we face as a society. Climate, health, trust, inclusion, resilience. The success of the industry we work in depends fundamentally on a healthy and safe world where people are empowered to achieve more. Now, here at Microsoft, our business grows only when people are able to prosper by working together. Roughly speaking, when the world prospers, Microsoft prospers, and the ability to do that depends more than ever on advances in science. In a nutshell, this is the time for science. Now, we've moved from an era where we use research to solve problems in computing to one where we use research across the sciences to help computing solve problems for humanity. And this is where computer science and all the other work we do at Microsoft Research and as a research community becomes ever more crucial. Advances in computer science can accelerate all the sciences, and the products and services our industry delivers can have an immediate and powerful impact on society. The work we do here has the potential to change the world more than ever before. To pick just one example, this week at the Research Summit, you'll hear about our newest lab, Microsoft Research Amsterdam. There, Max Welling and his colleagues are pursuing fundamental work in molecular simulation, putting the immense computing power we now have to the task of simulating reality right down to the behavior of individual atoms and molecules. Think for a moment about what motivates that work, what becomes possible if and when we can do that. That would be a world where we could build on that fundamental capability to achieve incredible breakthroughs in fields like healthcare, climate science, and material science. Combine this with the advances you'll hear about in artificial intelligence, which can help those scientists explore and make sense of the massive amounts of data involved, and the possibilities are just astounding. These are some of the dreams that we have as we enter the fourth decade of Microsoft Research. We see our work across disciplines from systems and networking to databases, security, cryptography, human-computer interaction, economics, the social sciences, and more through the lens of the huge impact that every advance could have on the world. This week at Research Summit, you'll hear directly from our researchers and their collaborators in academia and industry on the latest advances in computer science and many other disciplines that can advance foundational technologies and advance the state of human knowledge, empower human creativity and achievement, foster a resilient and sustainable society, support a healthy global society, ensure that technology is trustworthy and beneficial to everyone. Every one of the projects you'll hear about this week started with curiosity, looking at a problem in our world and wondering what computing can do to help solve it. Seeing a breakthrough in one area and thinking about how it could be applied more broadly, looking at the tremendous potential of new technologies and searching for novel applications. Now, you won't hear about some of the things that we've done, some of the curious pursuits this week, and for the most part, it's because they haven't led anywhere or haven't led anywhere yet, but some of them do, and the results are astounding. I'd like to tell a little bit of a story about speech-to-speech translation of languages. Many, many years ago, we were engaged in speech recognition research and machine translation. And this work was largely blue sky, just in the spirit of exploring what were the limits of computing. From that, we eventually were able to create technologies that were able to capture the major advance that deep neural nets would give. And from that, then take the mission-focused research effort to actually create a new technology integrated into products like Skype and PowerPoint and many others. And finally, to take that and provide that so that people in classrooms who are hard of hearing can finally engage. It's that kind of journey from blue sky thinking to new invention to mission-focused research and then to deploying in the real world. That's the spirit of the research that we do here. And it's what inspires us to walk into our labs every morning. Thank you, and have a great week.